Hi everyone, welcome to the July 26th edition of the TimeformUS Pacecast. I'm David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Milkowski, and we are looking back at last weekend's racing from around the country, though just focusing on three major venues this week. The big race at Monmouth Park on Saturday was the Grade 1 Haskell Invitational for the 3-year-olds. We'll talk about that race along with the 4 other stakes events that they ran on that Monmouth Saturday card. Some things to discuss with relation to the dirt track playing very fast, Chad Brown having a very strong hand in all the races. We'll get into all of it when we talk about those Monmouth races. Moving on to Saratoga, we have the Grade 1 Coaching Club American Oaks on Saturday, the Shoe V on Sunday, both producing some nice performances and big speed figures from the fillies and mares. We'll talk about some other races at Saratoga, including some 2-year-old performances and maiden races. Then we'll finish things up out in California at Del Mar, opening week of the Del Mar meet. Some are really kicking into high gear out in California. We'll talk about some of their opening weekend stakes races, including some turf events like the San Clemente and Oceanside, along with some others that earned notable speed figures. But Craig, pretty high quality weekend racing, especially some big efforts that we saw on the East Coast.
Yeah, definitely. We saw some big speed figures. I'm going to have to run a query on my database to see where the 130 we're going to talk about a little later stacks up for 3-year-old fillies, because I don't remember making many of those, but many good races this week.
Start things off in New Jersey at Monmouth Park, where the feature race was the Grade 1 Haskell for the 3-year-olds. Sometimes a prep for the Travers. We'll see how many of these do end up in that Midsummer Derby at Saratoga, but the Haskell always a prestigious race in its own right. And Craig, this one produced a pretty exciting finish as we had 2 runners battling down to the wire, actually both sons of that excellent first crop sire gun runner, Cyberknife, who snuck up the rail, just able to hold off the late surge of Taba.
Yeah, it might have been exciting for some. It was pretty painful for me, as we talked about on the forecast. I actually played a really small pick 4 ticket and just kept hitting repeat. And but I had Taba singled on there, didn't quite work out. Cyberknife, what can you say? He took the step forward. I didn't know he had that big a step forward in him, but he did. He got a 123 TimeformUS speed figure, and I want to say in large part that was due to Florent Giroux, who just gave him a masterful ride in here, and actually I think he was the difference. If somebody wanted to argue with me that Tebow was the best horse in here, I wouldn't put up much of a fight. I thought they both ran very well.
Yeah, I saw a lot of chatter after the race that Taba was the rightful winner of this race, and Mike Smith somehow messed it up and he should have won. Frankly, I didn't really see any of that. I guess that he's a horse that didn't really respond to being in behind horses coming around the far turn. I don't know if it was a kickback issue or maybe it's just a Taba issue. I mean, I talked about this on the forecast last week that he's a horse that we saw it in his workouts. He comes off the bridle very early. He's kind of a lazy horse, and he doesn't really look like he wants to do it out there, and the riders really have to get after him. And Mike Smith was asking this horse almost for his best at about the half-mile pole, and it took him a long time to really hit that top gear. On the other hand, Cyberknife, it was a totally different set of optics. He was traveling very well into the race, just almost not quite pulling, but racing keenly around the far turn under Florent Giroux, and whereas Taba was kind of backing up on the far turn, Cyberknife was just getting sweetly into that pocket, and he was perfectly positioned to come through on the inside when it really counted in the stretch. I thought they both finished off this race really well. I think that some people, Craig, were misinterpreting the pace a little bit. I saw some say that Jack Christopher, the reason that he lost this race was the pace, but I think people are missing the fact that this track at Monmouth Park was playing so incredibly fast on Saturday that a 46 and 4.5 mile really isn't that fast.
No, it's not. I actually made a tweet about this saying that it was nowhere near as fast as the CCA Oaks that we're going to talk about later, despite the raw times telling you something different. We have this track rated a 10 on the TimeformUS track speed rating on a 1 to 10 scale, so it's about as fast as you get. And there haven't been a whole lot of 10s either. It's a pretty rare thing, so it's just a really quick dirt track, and if you were taken by surprise by it, you haven't been paying attention at Monmouth, because it's been that way for at least a solid 2 weeks, maybe 3, where it's gotten 9 or 10 every single time. The one thing I would say is I don't think it was particularly speed favoring, but what a track like this does do is it helps speed horses hang on and go further than they might usually do. So I wouldn't be too excited about Jack Christopher doing two turns again anytime soon. It's not that he ran terribly, he certainly didn't. He got a 121 speed figure, he was only beaten 2 lengths. But there's just a lot of horses better than him at this distance right now. So it seems like a turn back to me would probably be in order because I don't really think he had an excuse.
I completely agree with that. And I saw some people harping on the fact that they went the third quarter of this race in 22.97 seconds, just a shade under 23. And viewing that as maybe Jack Christopher moving too soon or potentially, speeding up the pace at that point. But that is not what happened at all. I mean, you can look at the other dirt routes that we're going to talk about on this card, and all of them featured sub 23 third quarters. The Haskell was not some outlier in that respect. And frankly, it featured one of the slower ones. So it's not like this race really sped up midway through. And actually, that's the point when Cyberknife made his move. So if you think that was the fastest part of the race, that's when Cyberknife moved into it. So maybe he deserves extra credit for that. Not that I'm suggesting that's the case, but I feel like if you're making that argument, you got to upgrade the winner more than Jack Christopher. And Craig, I agree. Chad Brown, I saw him interviewed on Sunday. He's already saying the next target for Jack Christopher is going to be the Grade 1 H. Allen Jerkins going the 7 furlongs on Travers Day. That just seems like a really logical move for a horse that they experimented with the two turns. It didn't work out. They're probably going to focus on the shorter races moving forward. I think by the time the end of the year comes, maybe they'll have to make up their minds between the Breeders' Cup Sprint and the Dirt Mile, depending on how those races are coming up. But he's definitely one that prefers shorter. And we'll see who ends up going in the Travers. Cyberknife would be the one that you think would end up there. I believe Taba cannot run in the Travers due to the stable that he's in. I don't even think with a trainer change he's allowed to run. So maybe the winner comes back there, but we'll see what the Jim Dandy produces. But right now, it looks like the Travers could come up a pretty salty race.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems a little odd talking about the Travers this week and not the Jim Dandy because historically they've been running around the same week if memory serves. But obviously this change give horses a little more time until the Travers.
The other Grade 1 event on Saturday at Monmouth Park was the United Nations going 1 3/8 on the turf. And Craig, we had the slight favorite winning this one at Hamo. Chad Brown obviously had a strong hand in this race with Tribhuvan, the speed, setting the pace on the front end. And at Hamo, a closer, but not one that has to come from so far back. And I thought that Flavien Prat did a really good job getting at Hamo into position where he could take advantage if those speeds fell apart a little bit. And that's ultimately what happened. And he just got the jump on the other closers, and that proved to be the difference.
Yeah, it was, and I wouldn't give the other speed horses too much of an excuse when you see the second horse was Epic Bromance, who was 72-1 and held on for second in here. So good effort by Hamo. He took a small step forward in here, ran a 122, and he's a horse who just seems to be getting it a little more and more each time out. I'm not quite sure that this United Nations is a true Grade 1 like some of the ones we're going to see at Saratoga. I would say the Arlington Million, obviously. That I'm not sure what the plan is with that anymore. So we'll see what's going on here. But I would say this was more like a Grade 2 race, but it was still a nice performance by the winner.
I mean, I think that there were some good horses in here. We talked about it last week. I mean, the top 3 from the Manhattan all showed up here. So, I mean, the Manhattan was certainly a Grade 1 event. So I feel like, this was a reasonably strong field. Obviously, 2 of those 3 were not able to reproduce their performances in the Manhattan, particularly Tribhuvan, who I do want to point out, Craig, this pace, while it didn't start out that fast, and it looked like Tribhuvan was getting the right trip, controlling on the front end, the rider on Jose Ferrer on Epic Bromance really ratcheted up the pressure down the backstretch and moving around that far turn for the second time. You can see it on the TimeformUS pace figures. The pace really picked up, and it almost looked like Ferrer was going on a suicide mission, but I guess he knew what kind of horse he had underneath him because Epic Bromance broke Tribhuvan and then almost went on and won the race, and Amba was able to run him down. But I don't want to give short shrift to Epic Bromance. I don't know where it came from, but he ran a huge race to be second in here. Tribhuvan obviously fell apart to be fourth in here. I mean, the one no-show that I saw some people were trying to make an excuse for was Gouffo, who was fifth, and I'm done making excuses for this horse, Craig. He just doesn't have a whole lot of speed, and it seems like he always leaves himself with too much to do.
Yeah, he had too much to do. And as you say, it is an interesting looking pace line where it starts out in the high 120s and moves all the way up to a 138 as Tribhuvan is opening up a lead a little bit before getting run down. So it is worth noting we have red fractions at the 3/4 and the mile mark. So it can be a little deceiving when it's easy early. Sometimes we get in the habit of just labeling a pace as fast or slow. And this was one that kind of varied throughout. And Epic Bromance ran fine. He had actually run a 120 speed figure last time out, got a 122 here. So he's just one that was overlooked by a lot of people, including myself. I'm sure I didn't even mention him on the forecast, but he looks like he's turning into a pretty good horse.
Yeah, and you know that I have like mad love for Tribhuvan, and I just want to say that I feel like he repeated his Manhattan for the first mile and a quarter of this race, and then he just hit the wall. And maybe he's a horse that just really does not want to go this far. I mean, we saw it in the Sword Dancer last year when the pace heats up a mile and a half. Too much for him. He won this race last year, but with a much better pace situation. I think when they use those enterprising tactics, a mile and an eighth, a mile and a quarter, that's his distance. And just beyond that, probably too far.
Well, you beat me to it. Well, I was actually going to ask you about that because I had a similar thought that maybe it was just a little too far because he really did open up and seem to have put away the runner up, but just hit a wall in that last furlong.
Well, we had a parade of Chad Brown winners leading up to that, not quite able to complete the pick five, or it wasn't a pick five, but the 5 in a row in the Haskell, but Chad Brown did win the 4 other stakes on this card at a very short price in the grade 3 Molly Pitcher with search results. And Craig, I wouldn't say that search results showed up with her best effort here, but she didn't really need to. She was just superior to this field.
Yeah, she got a 114 for the win, which is a pretty big drop off her third last time out in the Phipps when she ran that big race behind Clairiere and Malathot when she dueled with Latruska, put that one away, opened up before getting run down. But I thought she ran fine in here. I expected she might regress a little bit off that big effort. She was coming back a little bit quick, but she ran fine, and I also think the pace figure was probably held back a little bit by what was not a very quick pace at all. It didn't quite make the blue fractions, but it was close, and she always was in hand, never looked like she wasn't going to win the race, so I'm not going to call her a 114 horse. She's better than that.
Yeah, and I hope that the connections do try her in the grade 1 personal ensign next time on Travers Day at Saratoga, because that could turn out to be basically a rerun of the Ogden Phipps, which was such a strong race from Belmont Stakes Day. We've already seen reporting that Latruska is pointing there to defend her title. Search results, I know that they're a little iffy on her going a mile and an eighth, but she belongs in that race, and I hope they take a shot. We'll obviously talk about the 2 others that would be the favorites in there when we get to the Shuvi, but search results does belong in that spot. Let's move on to the Grade 3 Monmouth Cup, run a little bit earlier in the day. And again, Chad Brown domination here as he sends out the top 2 finishers. Highly motivated, though, much the best over his stablemate Pipeline. And after kind of a lackluster start to his 4-year-old campaign, Craig, remember when he lost that race sprinting at Keeneland, he's really taken a step forward in his last couple starts.
Yeah, he looks good. He basically matched his speed figure from last time, ran a 119 in this spot, was able to just kind of sit outside off of what was not the strongest piece. It was just solid, I would say, and won as easy as could be. Never really looked like a winner. We hadn't seen Pipeline in a while, I don't believe. He was coming off of actually, he had run at Aqueduct. I take that back. On one of those speed bias tracks, and he ran fine, but he was no match for Highly Motivated. The speed figure kind of fits the grade 3 here. I don't know where you go with Highly Motivated for here. It's not like he's a horse for the grade 1s in New York. So I'll be interested to see where Chad Brown spots him.
Yeah, I thought he ran very well to win this race. Just ridden with a lot of confidence. They reserved him off the pace early. It was a slower pace than the Haskell. You can kind of lie these paces on top of each other because they both were over the same distance. This one a little bit slower early, sped up midway, and Highly Motivated actually made his move into that quickening part of the pace at the halfway point and was just better than his stablemate Pipeline, who probably doesn't really want to go a mile and an eighth. Both of these horses could be better going a little bit shorter, but Highly Motivated definitely can get the distance. And he was just best on this day. Kind of a weird situation, Craig, with this track record being broken for 9 furlongs twice on Saturday. The former track record holder, of course, was Spendebuck, who set it in 1985, and I wasn't around then, but I know that he was an exceptional racehorse, and just kind of weird to see that record broken so easily on this card, but that had everything to do with the speed of the track surface.
Yeah, I'll digress a little bit. Spendebuck is one of my favorite horses of all time. Back when I was I want to say 18 years old, not even 18, 17. We used to make trips to Garden State Park, and I saw him win a couple of the prep races for the Kentucky Derby. Unfortunately, I went into basic training, and it obviously isn't like now where you could bet the Kentucky Derby from anywhere. And I certainly wasn't betting it in basic training in San Antonio, Texas. But I did get to see him later in the year. He was quite a horse, so I was a little sad to see his record get beaten.
Well, the last stakes race we'll talk about for Monmouth on Saturday was the Grade 3 Matchmaker. And Craig, I think we did a good job on the forecast last week in this one, as we were both pretty high on the top 2 finishers in here. You had the better opinion, though, with La Mista just getting the job done over Fluffy Socks. And La Mista was one of the higher prices of the Chad Brown runners in this race, going off at 9-2. And I really thought Fluffy Socks had her measure at the top of the stretch, but La Mista just seemed like she wanted a little more. She battled back inside.
Yeah, I think she got a little better trip. It's something I did kind of mention on the forecast. I just get the impression when I watch Fluffy Socks, she isn't the kind of horse that has a lot of fight in her and wants to win these races. She won some early in her career, but there hadn't been a lot of W's lately. So I'm not sure what you can do with a horse like that. I think she's more talented than La Mista, but she had every reason to beat her here and wasn't able to do it. She ran a 120 speed figure, which is as good as she's done, but La Mista got a 121. So good solid effort from the Chad Browns. And shockingly to me, neither one of them were favored. It was Lady Rockstar, who neither one of us really got at all, and she didn't do much running.
Yeah, we talked about her a little bit on the forecast last week, a horse that we thought the public might go to just based on her impressive victories, but she was taking a big step up in class here, and it just proved to be a little bit too much as the 2 Chad Brown runners, 2 of his 3, completed the exacta here. Let's move north, Craig, and talk about some races from Saratoga last week. Obviously, the one that earned the biggest speed figure was that race you were previewing at the start, the Grade 1 Coaching Club American Oaks on Saturday for the fillies. It looked like it was going to turn into a real duel between these 2 favorites around the far turn as Nest poked her head in front and Secret Oath tried to go with her, but when they got into the stretch, it was a one-horse race as Nest just drew away to a performance that probably is going to earn her a championship.
Yeah, that was very impressive from Nest. I liked everything I saw about it. Particularly, she showed a lot more early speed than what we've seen from her before. I mean, she's been up close to the pace, but this was a fast pace. It was not one that was dawdling. We have all the fractions coded in red. We already talked about the Monmouth track. Well, Saratoga was definitely on the opposite end of the spectrum, as it has been most of the meet. It's been a pretty dead, tiring surface. On that 1 to 10 scale, we only have it rated a 5. So that 47-46 half for this race, that she was actually in front when they hit that point of the race, was pretty darn quick. It actually got pace figures in the 140s, and it didn't matter. She was able to just blow this field away. You could make the argument that Secret Oath maybe had a little bit tougher trip. She was 4 wide, but I don't think it mattered. I mean, she lost by over a dozen lengths. Maybe she would have ran a little better than what she finished up, but she still wound up with a 117 speed figure, which is kind of what she's been running. So just a powerhouse performance by Nest, and I'm really excited to see where she goes from here.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. You can make the excuse for Secret Oath that she was a little bit wide, but that doesn't bridge the gap between she and Nest at the end. And we already knew that Nest had plenty of stamina based on the way that she ran in the Belmont Stakes. And that really came in handy here because this dirt track at Saratoga was pretty demanding, especially in the two-turn routes all week, and Ness had no trouble handling it. I mean, she just asserted her superiority at the top of the stretch and continued to draw off at the very end. I mean, some people might harp on the fact that the final eighth of a mile went in 14 and change, but she had done all of her work prior to that, and everybody else was going a lot slower than that at the end. So, I mean, time is always relative in these situations, and she was much the best on this situation. We should note, I mean, you talked about the fast pace. This race got basically as big of a pace upgrade as you're going to see in a two-turn dirt route. Ness' final time number was a 1:22, which is about in line with the Bayer speed figure that she got. I think it was a 1:04, but justifiably, she and most of those behind her got a big pace upgrade for just really going a pretty quick half mile and 6 furlong fraction over such a dead surface.
Yeah, it's probably a pipe dream to that we would never see because there would be other spots, but there's no reason she couldn't compete in the Travers. I mean, she ran that well. She's ran as fast as any of the 3-year-olds we've seen. She's tried the boys once, so I know it probably won't happen, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that it did because that was some performance.
Yeah, Pletcher and the owners the next day, they did leave the door open to maybe competing in the Travers. I agree with you. I think it's a long shot that she actually shows up there. It just seems from a divisional honors standpoint, if she were to win the Alabama, then the 3-year-old filly conversation is just over at that point. I mean, she is the champion if she wins two of these two grade ones at Saratoga, and maybe it's a little bit open to debate if she's off the board in the Travers, and then Secret Oath maybe wins wins the Alabama, let's say. But I think that Pletcher would consider it if they really believed that she was going to win the Travers. And off this performance, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility they could get to that point where that is their determination, because she ran as fast as the males, and it looked like she had something left in reserve. So she's an exciting horse that's obviously improving a great deal right now. I think we'll see her in the Alabama, but it would be exciting if they decide to go the other route. Let's move on to Sunday's card at Saratoga. Same distance, but we'll go 1 year older and talk about the 4-year-olds in the Grade 2 Chuvy. And, Craig, for a Grade 2 event, it was really nice to see both connections of Malathaat and Clairiere actually run in this race. I know that it's just a prep for the Personal Ensign, and they both probably have that as their major summer goal, but nice to see two top horses not ducking each other and actually duking out on the racetrack. And Clairiere, I mean, she had lost to Malathaat, I think, 4 times in a row when they met as 3-year-olds, but this year it's a different story. She's won their last 2 matchups.
Yeah, she seems to have turned the tables, and she ran pretty fast doing so. It was a little bit of a tricky speed figure to make. Unlike Saturday, there wasn't a second route race, but at Saratoga, the sprints and the routes usually line up pretty nicely. They did on Saturday, and it looked like they did again. And if anything, this race could have been a little faster. I was pretty conservative, so Clairiere got a 125, basically matching the 126 she ran last time when she also beat Malathaat in the Phipps. And what I thought was really nice here was the ride by Joel Rosario, who looked like he was going to get in trouble somehow in a 4-horse field, but he just refused to let it happen. Now, I say nice ride because he was able to get himself out of that spot and win. It easily could have turned into an ugly ride had he not done so, but once he did, she established right now, for me at least, that she's just a better horse than Malathaat.
Yeah, I think you have to come to that conclusion based on this race and the Phipps last time. They both got a great pace setup in the Phipps. I mean, maybe Malathaat was a length ahead of Clairiere early, but they both were in the right position off that torrid early pace, and Clairiere just had the better finish that day. And once again here, I think the difference was a little bit greater. Malathaat just never looked like she was traveling like a winner. She looked just a little bit dull coming around the far turn, came off the bridle much earlier than Clairiere did. For a second, it looked like she might not even get past Crazy Beautiful, who ran a surprisingly big race to finish 3rd in here. But Clairiere, I mean, you could see she was traveling like a winner around the far turn. That jockey dynamic that you mentioned, a little bit interesting to see, because I think John Velasquez was 100% in the right. He had his position, and he was going to hold it no matter what. He was not letting Joel Rosario out of that pocket, and he held his path. He kept a straight course, and Joel was the one that was trying to make some room that really wasn't there. And Joel is the kind of rider that he's not going to force his way out. I think I would call what he was doing like knocking on the door. He tried it a couple times, just a slight brush again, and Johnny said, "Nope, not letting you through." So we had to go back to the inside, and luckily there was room there, and she was just the best horse.
Yeah, you described that well. I was thinking it was like Johnny was riding two horses in the race, and rightfully so. He knew who his main competition was, and he almost pulled it off, but Joel was able to find the room. And I agree with you. I don't want to write off Crazy Beautiful's effort because I thought she took a step forward in here. She obviously did on the speed figures, but visually too. I mean, she's a horse who couldn't beat Army Wife last time out at Thistledown, and that one didn't run particularly well at Monmouth, but I thought Crazy Beautiful's effort was legitimate.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the personal ensign. Obviously, with a little more speed in there, there really was no speed at all in this race, and I guess it's a feather in the cap of Clairiere that she's been able to adapt to those kinds of situations now as a 4-year-old, even overcoming races where there's not a whole lot of pace. Let's move back to Saturday and talk about the other graded stakes event they ran this weekend at Saratoga, the Grade 3 Caress, going 5.5 furlongs on the turf for the fillies and mares. And Craig, a bit of a surprise result as the New York bred Robin Sparkles was able to take them all the way on the front end. And I think her advantage was really established in that opening quarter. The turf has been pretty hard and fast this week at Saratoga, even after we got some rain very early in the week. And if you get away with a soft enough quarter in these 5.5 furlong turf sprints, you can be pretty tough to reel in. And that was the case with Robin Sparkles.
Yeah, she was one I kind of thought she had lost her form. It irritates me a little that they don't time those races at Monmouth, so there's nothing we can do about it. Maybe she ran better than what I thought she did, but she certainly ran well here. We both thought she was going to get the lead, but I didn't think she was going to stick around. She did so, ran a 118 speed figure, which is good as she's done back in her better days when she was on a pretty long winning streak. So good effort from her. She's one I would probably be against next time because you just don't often see horses get leads this easy. We have the opening quarter coated in blue. I know the raw fraction was a 21:54, but at this distance on that track, it was not particularly fast. And she was just able to open up, and the others couldn't catch her. They almost did. They made up most of the 3 lengths, but Super Sensational just couldn't pull it off.
It was a race where there were definitely some trips. I'll actually be doing this race on my Horses to Watch episode right after we finish. I'll be recording that where I talk about some trips from this past week at Saratoga. Definitely some stuff going on towards the inner rail and the backstretch as Caravel was in a ton of trouble. She didn't run, though, after having trouble. Miss J. McKay, the horse that I liked, she had to steady a couple times, just was in the wrong place at the wrong time under Irad Ortiz. Arguably, she could have won with a better trip, but all of that trouble in behind, Robin Sparkles didn't have to worry about it because she was leading this pack and had that unencumbered trip on the front end.
Yeah, I look forward to that Horses to Watch. And the one thing I'll note about that is in these turf sprints, that's what's going to happen when you allow a leader to back it up in a pretty slow pace, which this was. It just jams everybody up in a smaller course than what we're typically used to, and it's going to cause trouble for some others.
Staying on the turf, on Friday, they ran another graded stakes event, this one for the 3-year-old fillies, the Lake George, and another pretty exciting finish, Craig. Again, 2 Chad Brown runners, which has become a theme in a lot of these turf stakes, but at least what you can say about Chad is when he has a couple of horses that fit the right condition, he lets them decide it on the racetrack rather than splitting them up, and that was the case here with Dolce Zell and Eminent Victor, and it was kind of the kind of race where neither one really deserved to lose. They both had a little bit of trouble, but Dolce Zell was able to get her nose on the wire first.
Yeah, it was a good solid race for the 3-year-olds. Exciting. It was actually, though, I think it's the one race of the Saratoga meet that I haven't seen live, but I did go back and watch the replay, and I think you have to give credit to Irad Ortiz in here, who was able to squeeze through, save ground, and despite having a little bit of trouble, he made the best of it, and the top 2 both got a 109 speed figure, which is solid for 3-year-olds this time of year. Nothing too special. They're going to have to take a step forward if they're going to tackle the division leaders.
Well, as always, at this time of year at Saratoga and Del Mar, there is plenty of two-year-old racing. We're going to talk about a couple of maiden winners from this past week at Saratoga, the two-year-olds. On Sunday, there was a two-year-old filly, Kaling, that was pretty impressive. This was a race that, when I did the morning line in my handicapping, I thought that there was some real quality in here, particularly from this filly and the runner-up Rarify, who is the Justify-sired half-sister to Run Happy. That's the one that took all the money, but I thought Kaling for Todd Pletcher, Craig, put in a really professional effort because she backed off the pace early, came around that heavy favorite, and was just best as she asserted herself through the lane.
Yeah, that was an impressive effort. She got a 101 TimeformUS speed figure for the win, which I think is better than the Schuylerville figure that we saw already. And we had talked about that we would probably see some maidens that were better than what we've been seeing in the stakes. And I definitely think Kaling was one of those. Rarify, I think she was a half to Run Happy, if I remember right, out of Justify, took all the money, opened up the lead, so really had no excuse. I mean, that one ran fine, but you expect Wesley Ward horses to come out running. So I was really impressed with Kaling and look forward to bigger and better things from her.
Yeah, she had trained really well coming into this race, and it looks like she could be one that could have a say in the spinaway later in the meet. We'll see what they decide to do with her, but it feels like this was a pretty strong maiden affair. A day earlier or I should say 2 days earlier, on Friday, we saw a turf sprint for the two-year-old males going 5.5 furlongs, and weird situation here, Craig, as somehow the public completely missed a Chad Brown first-time starter going off as the biggest price in the field at 11-1, but Appraise got the job done.
Yeah, I guess the public was all over Joseph O'Brien. I think it was his first starter here in the States. I guess I get it. He had been facing pretty good competition over there. I never really trust the European sprinters and the speed when they come over here. So this one was surprising to me. And we don't talk about a lot of turf sprint 2-year-olds, but this one ran well. He got a 103 speed figure, which is obviously pretty high. And I liked how he did it. He looked like he was very readable, was able to just tuck in behind the speeds and get the job done in the end. He was looking a little tired at the end, but I thought he ran a really good race.
Yeah, I was impressed by the performance. I think the top two in here, Appraise and the runner-up Inflation Nation, both Irish breds, they each ran really well, drawing 6 lengths clear of the rest of the field. That's a big margin, one of these 5.5 furlong turf sprints, to open up that kind of separation. And coming to the 16th pole, it really looked like Inflation Nation had Appraise's measure. It looked like he was going right on by, and Appraise saw that horse and really battled back at the very end to keep his head in front. I thought it was a game effort from this runner after, stalking that pace that was pretty quick. 103 TimeformUS speed figure. That's solid for the 2-year-olds at this time of year.
Yeah, and I should mention it was part of a daily double, which included a Todd Pletcher horse winning at, I think it was 19-1 in the second race. So mark that down as things you will probably never see again in horse racing. A Chad Brown, Todd Pletcher double that pays almost $400, I think it was.
Well, we'll stick with the maiden theme, but not a 2-year-old maiden, but we did say a 3-year-old debut on Thursday at Saratoga that was up to the mark in the first race. This one, not much of a secret, getting bet down to 4-5. Probably not facing the toughest field in the world, but this one certainly did the right things, winning by 4.25 lengths.
Yeah, it takes a little much to make the show here for a 3-year-old maiden debuting in the end of July. But this one, he was the goods. He got a 108 speed figure for the win, and I like the way he did it. It wasn't one of these maidens who just goes to the lead, sits on the rail, draws away. He was actually pretty wide around the course. Was able to raid in, behind the speed horses and just blew them away in the lane. So it looks like this one has a promising future. Obviously, must have had some issues to debut this late, but if he can stay sound, he's going to be a good one.
Yeah, this is a horse that I know was very highly regarded by the Pletcher barn when he was a 2-year-old. he had actually, I remember looking up his pedigree and everything, and I was having some deja vu. He had actually been entered in June of 2021 at Belmont to make his debut and was scratched, I think, the morning of the race. I don't know what the issue was, but clearly something serious because he was off for nearly 13 months before he showed up in the entries again. But they finally got him right. He had been training well into this race, and he ran a big race to win. Son of Not This Time has got those great stats with firsters, and the second dam on this one is Capote Bell, who raced in the late 90s, just an exceptionally fast filly. I believe she won the test up at Saratoga in like her third or fourth career start. She was a real good one, and this one's inherited some of that speed. Let's move out to California and talk about some of those races from opening weekend at Del Mar. Feature race on Saturday was the Grade 2 San Clemente. This one for the 3-year-old fillies on the turf, and looked like a pretty competitive affair coming in, Craig. And we're going to talk about a couple of these stakes races where it feels like Umberto Rispoli really made the difference, saving ground and guiding these horses to victory.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me that the Philly version of this race, the San Clemente, is a grade 2, whereas the Oceanside, the counterpart, which is run on opening day, is just a listed stake. But I'm sure there's a reason for that. And yeah, Umberto Rispoli has clearly made the right decision to go back out west. Not only is he winning, he doesn't have to deal with Flavian Prat anymore. He's getting most of the better mounts, and he just seems like a different rider out there. In this one, he rode Bella Bell, who was 1-for-1 here in this country, having won at Santa Anita in a small stakes race, and was able to make the jump up. She had stayed pretty close up in her debut back in January, quite a while ago. But she showed up again, dropped way back in here in a race that featured more pace, and was able to get the job done. She's going to get about a 106, 107 type speed figure. And as you say, Rispoli made all the difference. He was able to save ground. He found every right spot. Easily could have been stopped a few times and was just able to thread his way through.
Yeah, and people talk about Chad Brown having an embarrassment of riches on the East Coast. I mean, it's getting to that point with Richard Baltus, the West Coast. I mean, I'm sorry, not Richard Baltus. Getting to the point with Phil D'Amato on the West Coast. I was about to say, especially after the suspension of Richard Baltus, had a bit of a Freudian slip there. But Phil D'Amato, he had 4 runners in this race and sent out the top 3 finishers, including the runner-up, who went off at 36-1. So a nice trifecta for 3 of his 4 completing those top 3 spots. But it seems like he just has a ton of good turf runners, getting a lot of those European imports. And Bella Bell, one of those, as you said, now 2-for-2 in this country.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. It's kind of, I've always talked about on this show, Richard Baltus and Phil D'Amato. They're the 2 names you had to know on turf out west, and now one of them is not there, and Phil D'Amato is just cleaning up.
Move on to the other race that you mentioned for the 3-year-olds on the turf, that won the restricted stakes, the Oceanside, on that opening day Friday card. And the winner, Balnikov, I would say this ride by Umberto Rispoli even better than the one we saw on Saturday, because this horse at multiple points coming around the far turn looked like he was going to be in trouble. It was a big field, a ton of traffic to navigate, and Umberto just kind of took his chances, staying inside about too wide at the top of the stretch, but the inside path opened up and he was able to guide this horse on through.
Yeah, this would have been one of those where I would have liked to seen the camera on him if they had some where you could follow the trip like we saw on the Derby with Rich Strike, because it had to be quite the adventure. He laid way further back than he did last time when he was beaten as a 3-5 favorite at Santa Anita in a listed stakes race, and just dropped right out to the back. And somehow Rispoli was able to get him through, work out the trip. He actually did get a 107 speed figure that's official, so very similar to the San Clemente. Again, these aren't 3-year-olds I would expect to be shipping east and winning top grade 1s, but out in California, that's going to win you a lot of races.
No, for sure. He did run well when they shipped him to the East Coast in that American turf. It looked like he had that race won and just got run down at the very end after appearing like he had taken the lead at the 16th pole. And especially after I saw that race, Craig, it really feels like Balnikov is a horse that does not want to go much of a step beyond a mile. I think that might have been the problem too back when he lost as the 3-5 favorite, the mile and an eighth distance. It just feels like maybe that saps that turn of foot that he has a little bit, and he was able to produce it here over that flat 1 mile distance and just got that great ride from Rispoli to get the job done. Really nice effort from him, but like you said, not beating the toughest field out in California. Let's move on to another stakes event from, I believe, the Sunday card at Del Mar. This was the Grade 3 Cougar II going 1.5 miles in that dirt marathon division on the main track. Big favorite in this one was Tis Magician, who has had a lot of success in this division over the past couple of seasons, but it was Haywood's Beach who stepped up and beat him here, and just a horse that looks like he's blossoming on the dirt.
Yeah, John Sadler's got him going in the right direction. He's run some good races in the past. He seems to like these longer distances, probably his best when they come in 1.25 miles. He ran in the Shoemaker, which seemed like a really odd placement for him, but he actually wasn't embarrassed that day, ran a decent fourth with a good speed figure, and he was able to transfer it on the dirt here. He got the better of Tis Magician, got a 119 speed figure for the win, so solid effort from him. We don't get to talk about these horses all that much because we don't see a lot of these longer races, 1.5 mile races. So it's kind of a small division. I actually think we have one coming up at Saratoga this week where we'll see Lone Sailor. And I think these horses fit with those if they were to meet up, but it's just not much of a division.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see it. I feel like the East Coast runners are a little bit tougher. We saw that kind of play out a little bit in the Brooklyn, which just typically that comes up as a tougher race than some of the marathon events that we see out in California. Haywood's Beach, though, I don't want to take anything away from him. He ran pretty well. Tis Magician, maybe not as good as he was last year, but this horse was always traveling better than that one. And it just seems like distance is really the key for Haywood's Beach. As you said, 1 mile in the Shoemaker, 2 back on the turf. I mean, regardless of surface, that's just too short for him. Even though he's a son of Speightstown, who's such a versatile sire, known more for sprinters, but he gets some longer runners as well. And this one just seems to appreciate the longer distances. Let's move on to a couple of non-stakes events from Del Mar. One of those on Friday, that opening day card, we saw an allowance event won by a 3-year-old Kid Corleone for Doug O'Neill. And wow, this was a pretty eye-opening speed figure for this horse, Craig, who's just making the second dirt start of his career.
Yeah, I was surprised. I watched this late race on television when it happened, and it looked visually impressive, but I wasn't sure what the number was going to be, but it fit on the track. He's going to get a 122 for the effort, and it's hard for me to argue with it. This was run right after the stakes race that day, and he beat a pretty decent Bob Baffert horse in there, Murray, who took most of the money. But he was able to beat him easily, and the time came back fast. There were plenty of dirt sprints at Del Mar on the day, so it seems legit, and like he just took a really big step forward in his second effort.
Yeah, it does seem legit. I mean, the third place finisher, Exalted, had just picked up some minor awards, a couple of third place finishes in the recent grade 2s that they had run at in California recently. Actually, he's a horse that's had some long layoffs. I'm seeing this now. He's actually competed in the last 2 editions of the Triple Bend, a year apart. But that's a horse who has been running against some of the best sprinters in California, and he was beaten a similar margin by this allowance winner. So I guess that says that Kid Corleone actually did run a really nice speed figure in the kind of race that could make him competitive in some of those graded stakes events. We'll see what they decide to do with him. As he is a 3-year-old, I guess they could ship him east for a race like the Allen Jerkins, but with some graded stakes that have that 3-year-old and up condition in California, maybe they might want to stay out there and face older horses next time in stakes company.
Yeah, he certainly had some figures to compete, and I said it was a second start. It was a second dirt start. He had debuted on the turf first time out, but yeah, big effort from him. I look forward to seeing where he shows up. Maybe a race like the Bing Crosby. He certainly ran fast enough to be in there.
We'll finish things up with another allowance race that we'll discuss from this past week on Sunday, going the 1 mile distance. This one was won by the California bred Hail Freedom, another Doug O'Neill trainee who just seems like he's really blossomed since switching from the turf back over to dirt.
Yeah, I feel like we might have talked about this one after his last race when he ran a similar 120 speed figure. I could be wrong on that, though, but I know I noted it when I made it, and he's probably going to get a similar speed figure this time as well. I'll probably have that later today or early tomorrow morning, but just glancing at the worksheet, it looked like it's going to be yet another 120 for him. So not sure what the plans are for him, but he's a Calbred who can definitely run.
Oh, for sure. And he's a horse that has a little bit of pull in him. I mean, it looked like Mike Smith was trying to rate him at about third as they came into that clubhouse turn for the first time. But this horse had wanted no part of being behind other horses. I mean, he pulled Mike Smith up to the lead. And Mike Smith's not the kind of rider that's going to fight horses in that situation. He just dropped his hands and let him open up. And the horse responded well to those tactics. He's clearly one that likes to run on the front end and was successful with that running style here. And just a California bred, but he's earned some nice speed figures. So we'll see where he goes from here. Well, everybody, that's all the racing to recap from this past week, but given the time of year that it is, there's always things to look ahead to on the calendar. Craig, we do have a big card coming up at Saratoga this weekend. We had already mentioned, the Jim Dandy not being run on the same week as the Haskell. Well, it's coming up this Saturday, and it looks like it's going to be a really nice race with Chad Brown expected to run both of his top 3-year-olds early voting in Zandon. Epicenter also supposed to be in there, the runner-up in both the Derby and the Preakness. So that's coming up as a really strong race. I think we're also supposed to see Jackie's Warrior in the AG Vanderbilt. So a lot to look forward to at Saratoga. We'll see how that sequence comes up, but I imagine we could talk about that on the forecast later this week.
Yeah, and I think the San Diego's being run at Del Mar. Mandaloon was shipping out there last I saw, so there's some interesting stuff. Del Mar, the first week is a little on the slow side. It was some great betting races. Not so much quality like we're used to seeing, but that's about the amp up there as well. So just great time of year to be a horse player.
Yeah, plenty to look forward to, and hopefully these cards come up with some pretty playable sequences that we can talk about on our podcast coming up later this week. Remember that you can always listen to us on DRF.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Wherever you get your podcast, just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Everybody, thanks for listening this week, and make sure to catch Craig and I on the TimeformUS Forecast coming up on Friday.